And I think at that stage, those moments of doubt just pop into your head. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not, why am I not like the others?
Princess Beatrice's world is shaken. Big whispers say a secret DNA test revealed a shock about her dad. Now people claim she's so upset, she cut off her family. This giant secret is already tearing the royals apart. But could this be the final bombshell that makes the ancient crown itself shatter into a million pieces before our very eyes? Princess Beatrice, a royal beginning clouded by whispers. The moment Beatrice Elizabeth Mary of York was born on August 8, 1988, she took her first breath in the fancy Portland Hospital in London, a place where many famous babies are born. And bam, she was royalty. Her dad was Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, who was one of Queen Elizabeth II's sons. That made Beatrice the Queen's granddaughter. Her mom was Sarah Ferguson, known to everyone as Fergie, the Duchess of York. Being the Queen's granddaughter is a pretty huge deal, like being in a real-life storybook. When Beatrice was just a tiny baby, she had a special ceremony called a christening. Think of it as a very important welcome party. It wasn't just any party, though. It was held in the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace, a super old and super royal church in London that has seen centuries of kings and queens. Her parents picked special people to be her godparents, like guides for her life. Some of these godparents were rich and famous, and some were even royals from other countries. It was all very grand and official. But here's a funny little thing that makes you go, Prince Andrew and Fergie waited almost 2 whole weeks to tell the world Beatrice's name. Most parents are so excited, they shout the name from the rooftops right away. Why the delay? Were they just trying to pick the perfect name? Or were they already good at keeping things quiet even back then? It's a tiny detail, but sometimes tiny details can be clues to bigger things later on. Could this be a hint that secrets were already a part of the York family story, even from the very beginning? A few years later, in 1990, Beatrice got a little sister, Princess Eugenie. Now there were 2 little princesses in the York family. Imagine them playing in giant palace rooms with sparkling chandeliers and running through gardens so big they looked like parks. It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Like something out of a Disney movie. They probably had nannies to look after them, ponies to ride, and all the toys a kid could wish for. But even for princesses, life isn't always a perfect fairy tale. Sometimes sad things happen, even when you live in a castle. When Beatrice was only about 7 years old, something big and sad shook her world. Her mom and dad, Prince Andrew and Fergie, decided to split up. They got a divorce in 1996 after being separated for a few years. This was huge news all over the world. A royal divorce. People couldn't stop talking about it. It was like a real-life royal soap opera. Prince Andrew and Fergie told everyone they would still be good friends and would both help raise Beatrice and Eugenie. They even came up with a plan to share looking after the girls. The Queen, Beatrice's powerful grandma, made sure her granddaughters were taken care of. She set up something called a trust fund for them, which is like a special savings account, and put a lot of money in it. Reports said it was around £1.4 million. That's like $1 gazillion to most of us. So Beatrice and Eugenie definitely weren't going to be poor. A princess works extra hard. Like all kids, Princess Beatrice had to go to school. But she didn't just go to any ordinary school down the street. She went to some very fancy and expensive schools. First, there was Upton House School in Windsor, a town famous for its huge castle, where the Queen lived a lot of the time. Then she went to Coworth Park School. After that, from the age of 11, she became a boarder at St. George's School in Ascot, another posh town. These are the kinds of schools where many rich and important people send their children. The students wear smart uniforms, and the buildings often look like mini castles themselves. But even in these fancy schools, with all the best teachers and resources, Beatrice had a secret struggle. It was something she didn't talk about much at first. When she was 7 years old, doctors told her she had something called dyslexia. Now, what is dyslexia? It's a learning difference that makes it really, really hard to read and write. For someone with dyslexia, words on a page can look all jumbled up, like they're dancing around or letters are swapping places. Imagine trying to do your homework or read a storybook when the words just won't stay still. It can be incredibly frustrating. Beatrice herself has spoken about it since she grew up. She once said, "I remember we had different colored paper for dyslexia, and I was always asking, why and what is it, and what does it mean?" She also shared, "The most defining moment of my life was when I was 7, and they told me I had dyslexia. It was a gift and a curse." It was a big challenge for her. Reading out loud in class, writing essays, even just understanding the instructions for an assignment, all these things were much harder for Beatrice than for many of her classmates. Because of this, she even had to wait an extra year to take some really important exams called GCSEs. She took them when she was 17 instead of 16 like most kids, so she could be super ready and have the best chance to succeed. But did Beatrice let dyslexia beat her? Did she give up and say, "I can't do this"? No way. She was a super hard worker. She knew she had to put in extra effort, and she did. She studied and studied, probably spending many more hours on her homework than other students. And guess what? Her hard work paid off. She did great in her exams. She got an A in drama. Maybe she was really good at acting out stories and characters? That would make sense, as drama often involves understanding people and emotions, not just reading lines perfectly. And she got B's in history and film studies. Those are really good grades, especially for someone who finds reading and writing so tough. And get this, the other students at St. George's School liked and respected her so much that they picked her to be head girl in her last year. That's a huge honor. It's like being the school president or the captain of all the students. It shows that she wasn't just a shy princess hiding in the background. She was strong, smart, and people looked up to her. She even sang in the school choir, which must have been a fun way to be part of a team and express herself. When she turned 18, that's a big birthday for anyone, right? Well, for Princess Beatrice, it was huge. Her parents threw a giant, super fancy party for her at Windsor Castle. Can you imagine having your 18th birthday party in a real castle? It was a masked ball where everyone wore beautiful costumes and mysterious masks over their eyes. It must have felt like being in a Cinderella story. The theme was 1888, a throwback to Victorian times, and it was said to have cost a massive £400,000. They even had a super famous photographer, Mario Testino, take her special birthday picture. She looked all grown up and very glamorous. After finishing school at St. George's, she went to a big university called Goldsmiths, University of London. She studied history and the history of ideas for 3 years. And she did it. She got her degree. So Princess Beatrice wasn't just a princess with a pretty title. She had a good brain, and she wasn't afraid to use it, even when things were difficult for her. But what would she do after university? Would she just attend royal events and cut ribbons, or did she have other plans? The world was watching, and Beatrice was about to show them she was more than just a York princess. She was ready to carve her own path, but could she ever truly escape the long shadow of the royal family and its many, many secrets? The challenges she overcame in school were tough, but were they just a warm-up for even bigger battles ahead? A princess tries to be normal. After getting her degree from Goldsmiths University, Princess Beatrice didn't just sit around Buckingham Palace polishing her tiaras. She wanted to work. She wanted to experience what it was like to have a real job, just like millions of other young people. This was pretty unusual for a high-ranking royal princess at the time. Her first taste of the working world was at the super fancy department store, Selfridges, in London. Can you believe it? A granddaughter of the Queen working as a sales assistant. She reportedly did this for a month as unpaid work experience, helping shoppers find clothes and ringing up their purchases. Imagine walking into a store and being helped by a real-life princess. She also did a stint in the press office of the Foreign Office for a while, again unpaid, to learn about how government works. It seemed like Beatrice was trying to figure out what she wanted to do. She even reportedly tried to get a job with a big newspaper company called the Financial Times. She was exploring different paths, trying to be a normal person, not just Princess Beatrice of York. And then something really cool happened. She was in a movie. It was a small part, but still a real movie. The film was called The Young Victoria, released in 2009, which was all about her ancestor, Queen Victoria, when she was a young queen. Beatrice played a tiny role as one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting. She didn't even have any speaking lines, but she was there on the big screen. She was the first member of the royal family to appear in a non-documentary film. This was a fun little adventure, but it also showed her interest in a world outside the strict rules of royalty. Later, she got a more serious job at a big movie company, Sony Pictures Entertainment. She worked in their London office as an intermediate coordinating producer. But then, oh no, disaster struck. In 2014, Sony Pictures was hit by a massive cyber attack. Nasty hackers broke into their computers and stole tons of secret information, emails, movie scripts, employee salaries, everything. It was a huge mess and super embarrassing for Sony. So, after about a year there, Beatrice decided to leave that job. Probably a good idea to get away from all that drama, right? Then, in 2015, she did something really brave and independent. She packed her bags and moved all the way to New York City. That's across the Atlantic Ocean, a whole different country. Why New York? Maybe she wanted to get away from all the royal rules and the constant attention of the British newspapers in London. Maybe she wanted to prove she could make it on her own in one of the busiest, most exciting cities in the world. In New York, she started building her own life. She got a full-time job at a company called Sandbridge Capital, which invests in new businesses. She was working, paying her own way, though she still had her royal trust fund, of course. By 2017, she was kind of splitting her time, going back and forth between London for royal duties and family, and New York for her job. When she was working, she didn't even use her fancy princess title. She just called herself Beatrice York. It was like she had two lives, Princess Beatrice in the UK and Beatrice York, the working woman, in the USA. She then moved to another company called Affinity, a big American software company that uses artificial intelligence. She became their vice president of partnerships and strategy. That's a really important job. At Affinity, one of the things she focused on was helping women get into top leadership roles in big companies. That's a really great and important thing to do, using her position to help others. But here's a little piece of royal news from a few years earlier that might be important to remember. Back around 2011, something changed for Beatrice and her sister Eugenie. It was reported that they lost their 24/7 police protection that was paid for by the taxpayers. You know how important royals usually have bodyguards that follow them everywhere to keep them safe? Well, suddenly, Beatrice and Eugenie didn't have that full-time security anymore, or at least the public wasn't paying for it. The story was that their uncle, Prince Charles, who is now King Charles III, was trying to slim down the monarchy and cut costs. And Beatrice and Eugenie's expensive bodyguards were part of what got cut. But maybe, just maybe, all these experiences, the dyslexia, her parents' divorce, trying to find her own way in the working world, the change in her security status, were getting her ready for a life where she would need to be even stronger than she ever knew. A life where a giant, earth-shattering secret was just waiting for the right moment to pop out and change everything. Was her move to New York really just about a job, or was she trying to escape something else, something brewing back home in the palaces of London? The whispers were getting louder. Love, marriage, and a cloud of scandal. So, Princess Beatrice is living her life, part royal in London, part working woman in New York. She's independent, she's got a career. And then, love comes knocking, or so it seemed. In March 2019, Beatrice went to a very fancy party in London, the National Portrait Gallery Gala. And guess who was with her, looking very much like her date? A handsome, successful man named Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi. Everyone calls him Edo. Now, Edo wasn't just any guy Beatrice met at a coffee shop. He's a multimillionaire property developer. He builds and designs amazing houses and buildings for rich people. And his family is super wealthy and has old fancy titles from Italy. His dad, Count Alessandro Mapelli Mozzi, was even in the Olympics as a skier for Great Britain, though he has Italian aristocratic roots. How cool is that? Here's something really interesting about Edo and his family. Even though Italy doesn't really have kings and queens and nobles anymore, it's a republic. Edo's family got a special title a super long time ago, back in 1913. An Italian king made them counts, and that title gets passed down from the father to the oldest son. So, Edo? He's actually Count Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi. It doesn't mean he rules over any land in Italy, but it sounds very grand and important, doesn't it? It adds a little extra sparkle to his already impressive profile. When Beatrice and Edo showed up at that party together, looking very happy and comfortable, people started whispering. Not just any whispers, but excited whispers. News reporters quickly found out that they had actually been dating quietly for a few months already, maybe since September or October of 2018. They had even been on holiday together. It turned out that their families had known each other for many years. Fergie, Beatrice's mom, was friends with Edo's late stepfather. So this wasn't a brand new meeting, it was more like old friends reconnecting and finding something special. Then, a little later in May 2019, Beatrice and Edo went to another royal wedding together, the wedding of Lady Gabriella Windsor. That was a big sign. When a royal brings someone as their official guest to a family wedding, it usually means things are getting pretty serious. The cameras flashed, and everyone agreed they looked like a perfect couple. And they were. Things moved quickly. Later that year, in September 2019, while Beatrice and Edo were on a romantic trip to Italy, Edo's ancestral homeland, he asked her to marry him, and Beatrice said yes. Her dad's office at Buckingham Palace officially announced the happy news to the world. Wedding bells were going to ring for Princess Beatrice. They started planning a big, beautiful royal wedding. It was going to be on May 29th, 2020, at the Chapel Royal in St. James's Palace in London, the same historic chapel where Beatrice was christened. And after the ceremony, the Queen herself was going to host a giant, fabulous party for them in the gardens of Buckingham Palace. Can you imagine how amazing that would have been? All the fancy dresses, the incredible hats, flowers everywhere, music, dancing, and all the royals gathered together. It was set to be the royal wedding of the year. But then disaster struck again, and this time it affected the whole world. The COVID-19 pandemic started spreading like wildfire. Countries went into lockdown, people had to stay home, and big gatherings were banned to keep everyone safe. First, Beatrice and Edo had to cancel their big, fancy reception at Buckingham Palace. That was a huge disappointment. Then, as the pandemic got worse, they had to make an even sadder decision. They had to call off the whole wedding ceremony scheduled for May. Oh, that must have been so heartbreaking for Beatrice and Edo. To plan your dream wedding and then have to cancel it all because of a global virus? Awful. But they still wanted to get married. They loved each other. So they decided to do it in a very different, very quiet, and very secret way. On July 17, 2020, Princess Beatrice and Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi had a super small, super secret wedding. They got married at the Royal Chapel of All Saints in Windsor Great Park, which is a little private chapel on the grounds of Royal Lodge, where Beatrice's parents live. Nobody even knew it was happening until it was all over. There were only about 20 guests, including the Queen and Prince Philip, Beatrice's grandparents, her parents, Prince Andrew and Fergie, and her sister, Princess Eugenie. It was tiny compared to the grand wedding they had planned. Why so secret? Well, the palace said that official advice about the pandemic had changed a lot, and they wanted to make sure it was safe. But there was another big, dark cloud hanging over Beatrice's wedding plans even before the last health crisis hit. And that cloud was her dad, Prince Andrew. By this time, Prince Andrew was in a lot of trouble. Really, really serious trouble. It was all because of his friendship with a very bad man named Jeffrey Epstein, who had been accused of terrible crimes against young women and had then died in jail. Prince Andrew himself was accused of serious wrongdoing by a woman named Virginia Giuffre. He strongly denied it, but the whole thing was a massive scandal. Prince Andrew even did an interview on a BBC TV show called Newsnight in November 2019 to try and explain himself. But the interview was a complete disaster. It made him look even worse in the eyes of many people. It was so bad that just a few days later he had to step down from all his official royal jobs. He was basically hiding from public view. And all that terrible drama definitely affected Beatrice's wedding. Even if COVID hadn't happened, the scandal around Prince Andrew would have made a big public wedding very awkward and difficult. They say Prince Andrew did walk Beatrice down the aisle at her small secret wedding like fathers traditionally do. But when Buckingham Palace released the official wedding pictures to the world, guess who wasn't in any of them? Prince Andrew. Not one single picture. That was a very big statement. It was like they were trying to shield Beatrice's happy day from her father's problems, or maybe even trying to hide him. So Princess Beatrice's dream of a big, fairy tale royal wedding turned into a tiny, quiet wedding with a lot of sadness and scandal swirling around it. It must have been a very bittersweet day for her. But despite all the drama, Beatrice still looked like a beautiful princess. She wore a very special dress. It wasn't a brand new designer gown. Instead, it was an old dress that belonged to her grandma, the Queen. It was a vintage Norman Hartnell gown that the Queen had worn to several important events in the 1960s. The Queen let Beatrice borrow it, and the Queen's personal dressmaker, Angela Kelly, along with a designer named Stuart Parvin, helped to redesign it and make it perfect for Beatrice. They added puffy organza sleeves, and it looked stunning. And on her head she wore a sparkly diamond tiara called the Queen Mary Fringe Tiara. This was super special because it was the very same tiara that the Queen wore on her own wedding day to Prince Philip back in 1947. That was a lovely way for Beatrice to feel close to her beloved grandma on her special, though very unusual, wedding day. When Beatrice married Ado, she also became a stepmom. Ado already had a young son from a previous relationship with an American architect named Dara Huang. His son's name is Christopher Wolfe, but everyone calls him Wolfie. He was even part of the wedding as a page boy. Then more happy news for Beatrice and Ado. In May 2021, they announced they were expecting their first baby together. And on September 18, 2021, their little girl was born. They named her Sienna Elizabeth Mapelli Mozzi. She was born in the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London. When she was born, she was 11th in line to become queen one day, but it's very, very unlikely she ever will be, as there are many people ahead of her. After Beatrice's grandma, Queen Elizabeth II, passed away in September 2022, and Charles became king, little Sienna moved up one spot to a 10th in line. They had a special christening party for Sienna, but it was kept very private. And then, more baby news for the couple. In a delightful surprise, it was announced that Princess Beatrice and Eduardo were expecting their second child. On January 24, 2025, as per the earlier prompt's narrative timeline, their second daughter, Athena Elizabeth Rose Mapelli Mozzi, was born, also at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London. Little Athena became 11th in line to the throne, right after her big sister Sienna. After Sienna was born, Beatrice, Ado, Wolfie, and baby Sienna moved out of their apartment in St. James's Palace in London. They bought a big, old, beautiful farmhouse in the Cotswolds, a lovely part of the English countryside known for its rolling hills and pretty villages. It cost a reported £3.5 million. It seemed like they wanted a quieter, more private life, away from all the city noise and maybe, just maybe, away from all the royal drama and scandals that had surrounded them. But here's a funny thing about these little girls, Sienna and Athena. They can actually have fancy titles, but not because their mom, Beatrice, is a British princess. Nope. It's because of their dad, Edoardo. Remember he's an Italian count? Well, because he's a count from an old Italian noble family, his children also get to be nobles too, in the Italian way. So Sienna and Athena are born as Italian nobile donna, which means noble woman, or they could even be called countesses. But here's the strange part. Beatrice's kids and her sister Eugenie's kids don't automatically get to be called prince or princess in Britain or use the HRH, His/Her Royal Highness title. Why? Because of some old complicated royal rules made by King George V back in 1917. These rules basically say that only the children of the monarch, the male line grandchildren of the monarch, and the eldest son of the Prince of Wales get those top titles. Since Beatrice and Eugenie are princesses because their dad, Prince Andrew, is a son of the Queen, their kids don't automatically get the HRH status. So, it's kind of weird. These little girls have a special link to old Italian noble families through their dad, but not the top-tier British royal titles through their mom. It's like their dad's family history suddenly became very important in a different way. Was this a sign of things to come? A sign that family history, bloodlines, and who your dad really is matters a lot, maybe more than anyone could have imagined? The stage was set for something truly shocking. Could the quiet life Beatrice was trying to build be shattered by a secret from the past? A secret that questioned everything she thought she knew about herself and her family? The quiet Cotswolds countryside might not be peaceful for long. The big secret. A DNA bombshell rocks the royals. So, Princess Beatrice has her handsome Count husband, Edoardo. She has her two little girls, Sienna and Athena, who are also, in a way, Italian nobles. She has her big, beautiful house in the quiet countryside of the Cotswolds. Everything seems pretty nice and calm on the surface, right? Maybe even a little too calm for a family that's no stranger to headlines. Because around this time, a horrible, sneaky whisper started slithering its way through the grand, echoing halls of the royal palaces. It was like a tiny, poisonous snake gliding silently through the secret passageways and hidden rooms where the royals thought their secrets were safe. And this whisper, this dangerous, explosive whisper, was about Princess Beatrice. More specifically, it was about her dad, Prince Andrew. But most terrifyingly, it was about a DNA test. And it was about a secret so huge, so earth-shattering, that it had the power to blow the entire royal family apart. At first, it was just gossip. You know how people like to talk and spread stories, especially about famous people like the royals. Psst! Did you hear the latest about Beatrice? Someone might say in a hushed voice. My cousin's friend who works at the palace told me a secret about Prince Andrew. Little bits of chatter here and there. But this wasn't just any old gossip, like who was dating whom or who wore what to a party. This was serious. This was about something that could change everything. This was about a DNA test that had supposedly been done, a very, very secret test. And the results? They were described as being like a bombshell dropped right into the heart of the monarchy. The rumor factory started working overtime, churning out stories faster than a royal corgi chasing a squirrel. The main story that was going around, the one that made people gasp and shake their heads in disbelief, was that this top-secret DNA test had shown that one of Prince Andrew's daughters wasn't really his biological daughter. Where did this terrible, scandalous story even start? Nobody knew for sure. It was all wrapped up in mystery, which made it even more juicy and talked about. Some people whispered that the secret DNA results had been leaked from a super-secret paper, maybe a legal document, that was locked away in a dusty old safe somewhere deep inside Buckingham Palace. Others said that a sneaky newspaper reporter, always hungry for a royal scoop, had gotten a secret message, maybe an anonymous email or a whispered phone call, from someone who worked for the royals and knew all their deepest, darkest secrets. A disgruntled former employee, perhaps? There was even a wilder story going around that a private detective, hired for some other reason years ago, had accidentally stumbled upon this earth-shattering secret. Maybe they found an old letter or overheard a conversation they weren't supposed to hear. And this secret had been buried, kept hidden for many, many years, like a monster hiding under the royal bed. And it was only now, all these years later, that the monster was finally jumping out with a terrifying roar. The mystery just made the story even more shocking and impossible to ignore. The rumor, no matter where it came from, was very clear about one thing. The DNA results just didn't match up. They didn't show what everyone, including Beatrice herself, had believed her whole life. There was a big problem, a huge, undeniable mistake in the official royal family tree. A mismatch in the genetic code that you just couldn't explain away or sweep under the royal carpet. The DNA test, the Whispers insisted, pointed to a different man being Beatrice's real biological father. Not Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, son of the Queen. Someone else. And this someone else, the stories hinted, was probably not royal at all. He was probably just a regular person, an ordinary man, with no titles, no palaces, no connection to the centuries of royal bloodlines. So, if Beatrice isn't really Prince Andrew's daughter, what does that make her? A royal fraud or a stolen heir? Let us know in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more.